Welcome back. I'm Stephanie Ruhle. Democrats pitching an anti-Wall Street, anti-corporate message. They're hoping it wins over lower and middle-class Americans who see the economy as stacked against them. But that message may also be pushing Democratic business leaders off the fence and into the president's camp. Laura Barron-Lopez is a political reporter for Politico. Gabe DeBenedetti is a national correspondent for New York Magazine. Gabe, this is amazing to me because President Trump, he railed against Wall Street. He railed against corporate America, and Wall Street didn't vote for him. And now quietly, many Wall Street donors are saying, I can't stand Trump. I think he's a wackadoo. But if my choice is Elizabeth Warren or Trump, I'm not buying a MAGA hat, but I'm quietly going to vote for him.
Yeah, that's exactly right. They're basically terrified right now, broadly speaking, of Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders both because of what they see as really anti-Wall Street, anti-capitalist in some ways rhetoric. So they're not necessarily saying we got to go for Trump, but they're trying to find a candidate right now that they think can actually win and that can actually beat Donald Trump and not be too hostile to them right now. And a lot of them are finding that pretty difficult.
Laura, you cover Democratic candidates. Do they see any kind of political downside by having Wall Street upset with them? And let's just make something clear. Is this about political donations? Because it's hardly like hedge fund managers are a big voting bloc.
Right. I think political donations play a big key here. Warren and Sanders have both sworn off corporate PACs. Warren has probably gone the furthest when it comes to even swearing off big fundraisers, something that she knocked frontrunner Joe Biden on earlier this week. But Warren, I don't think, sees any risk to this. Her anti-greed, anti-corruption platform, she thinks is resonating well with voters. I was following her in South Carolina about a few weeks ago, and she talks a lot about her proposal to tax a wealth tax that would tax people who are very wealthy, have fortunes of 50 million or more, and it would be 2% tax on them. And that resonated really well with voters. So so far, she hasn't seen really any downside to pushing this. OK, Gabe, 50 million or more, that's not your average Wall Street person, investment pro, or even corporate person. Right. So you actually wrote in your piece, you quoted an investment professional who has voted Democrat his whole career, but suddenly he's saying, what matters more, my social values or my paycheck? Why are we framing it like this? Why are we framing it in a way it has to be one or the other? There are plenty of candidates. You got Joe Don. You have a former congressman from Maryland. You've got Joe Biden. You've got a string. You've got John Hickenlooper. Sure. You have a string of Democratic candidates that are not you're a capitalist or a socialist. Why are they allowing the far right to frame it this way, that your only choice is full socialist if you don't vote with Trump?
And you've exactly hit on something that's actually frustrating.
John Delaney. I couldn't find his name for a moment.
You've hit on something that's frustrating to a lot of the committed Democrats on Wall Street, including folks who have been donors to Democratic candidates and presidents in the past, which is like this is not this is not really a competition between socialism and capitalism as we're letting it turn into in this sort of national conversation, but they're trying to meet with a lot of these folks. I think one of the frustrations that you're hearing from some of these people is Wall Street is being used as a boogeyman, not necessarily as much as it has in previous cycles or by some candidates, but they're really nervous about someone like Bernie Sanders. And even when you look at someone like Joe Biden doesn't have a long history with Wall Street. He never had to raise a lot of money with them when he was running for Senate. He obviously was number 2 to President Obama. He's trying to change that now. And a lot of them do like Joe Biden, but they're still not 100% there yet.
But Laura, again, are they allowing someone else to create the narrative? Steve Schwarzman, co-founder of Blackstone, who went with President Trump to Saudi Arabia, and on that trip raised a $40 billion infrastructure fund. Steve Schwarzman, who benefited immensely from the fact that carried interest, though the president promised to get rid of it, remained in our tax code, which is an extraordinary hookup for the private equity industry, says yesterday, if there is a dramatic change in the tax area, if the Democrats win, that would be disincentive. It could be a shock to the economy. They're allowing massive Republican donors to push this narrative that Democrats are going to tax the hell out of them and shock the system. And your average voter out there, while they might not be a Democrat or a Republican, are saying, well, I don't want to shock the system. Why are these Democratic candidates not shutting it down completely?
Well, I think that on the trail, they are trying to do that. And on the trail, a lot of voters aren't necessarily listening to Trump when it comes to that. They still feel as though the economy has not gotten better for them. So while the good headlines of good GDP numbers and this economy that's booming may sound have good sound bites for Trump and may let him shift the message a bit when it comes to Democrats, on the trail, voters are saying, you know, our wages are still down, healthcare costs are still soaring. We still want to see action on prescription drug prices that are high. And so that's where Democrats are really trying to hammer their message and focus on that, because we saw that in 2018 it worked for them, and they're hoping to carry that momentum with them into 2020.
Well, we'll soon find out. Remember, the investment community isn't all of Wall Street. A lot of times it's just somebody with a 401k. President Trump didn't have those votes in the last election. He certainly wants them this time.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.